Hey folks, Surly again. A while ago I did an unboxing and a tabletop review of this Pietta 1851 Navy 36 that I picked up a while back. Back then I said I'd do a range review, so I finally got around to doing just that. So let me present some of my findings from running my first shots with this gun, and I'll include a bit of the accuracy with a few different loads, including mostly paper cartridge loads, as well as some of the weird little issues and problems you encounter with kind of these types of guns, especially as they foul up and get dirty. So quick note about how I approached evaluating and shooting this pistol. I fired it from a one-handed target stance at a distance of 25 yards. I didn't fire it from a rest. I wanted to kind of evaluate the mechanical reliability of the handgun, and also to see what sort of practical accuracy I could get out of it at a typical target distance. So I'll show you what that looks like right here. So just a little more details on what I used in actually doing this evaluation. So I used my capping kit to install the CCI number 11 caps on nipples in this gun, which has slick shot nipples if that matters. I used little blobs of lube that I made here. I used Hornady's 36 caliber, or rather 375 balls, so nothing too fancy, just the usual there. I did all my powder measuring with just a typical pistol flask. I didn't do anything super precise. So I was using either my 15 grain spout or my 20 grain spout here. Otherwise, I was using paper cartridges in either 15 or 20 grain charges there, and I made those cartridges with my kit here. And then I carried my paper cartridges in my little handy 36 paper cartridge boxes. So that's kind of the kit that went with this shoot. Now let's get into the targets. Okay, now I'll get into the targets a little bit here, and I'll just talk through these one by one, I suppose. Although I forgot to actually mark most of them, whether they were 15 or 20 grain charges, so I actually don't know in terms of whether those charge weights made any difference in accuracy. I don't think so, because again, shooting standing with one hand at 25 yards. So let me try to give you some contrast. You can actually see the shot holes. So we've got two hits here. This is with a 15 grain charge with the at 25 yards, and so you got one in the 9 ring here, and maybe one in the 7 ring, and then there's no other shots out of 6 on the paper. So who knows where those went? So I was probably getting pretty tired by that point. That was pretty late in the day. Next target, it's even more hilariously bad. So you've got a shot here out in the white, 3 that are off the target. That is outside of the rings, and then outside of that, I don't know where the other shots went. So we're not off to a great start here. This one looks a little bit better. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 at least, kind of stacked together in a nice group just above the bullseye. Again, 25-yard shots. And I couldn't tell you what charge this was, but this might have been an earlier group before my arm started to get tired. And I've got a few targets here just to show you, but we've got one shot in the 10 ring here, and then 1, 2, 3 up here off high. This one, you got maybe 1 or 2 shots here in the 10. Looks like 1 to me here with a tear in the 9 to 10 ring, and then you have 1 out in the 4. And again, no idea where the rest of the shots went. Okay, and then we've got a tear out here, and these ones are high. There's one that just caught the edge of the target here, and there's 3 high here and 1 there. So as you can see, as is typical with these kinds of pistols, the pistol tends to drift a little bit high, which is again typical of cap and ball revolvers, even out to 25 yards. So there's plenty of kind of rise, I suppose, because the front sight is actually pretty small. Another point, of course, is that again I wasn't shooting this from a rest. I was shooting it from one-handed target position. So a good bit of this is obviously just me. So it's a little bit hard to evaluate the true accuracy of this kind of Pietta 1851 based on my shooting, but Another thing that I kind of ran into is kind of the reliability of this gun, and I'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about some of the reliability issues, or just kind of fiddly nature of dealing with a 36 caliber revolver. So these chambers, they don't seem that small, just looking at it, but when you're trying to load this pistol, all the clearances of everything between the chambers and kind of the distances between, say, the chamber and the side of the barrel and so on are just a little bit smaller than on a 44, and it's smaller enough that you'll notice it quite clearly when you're shooting these guns. So if you're not used to a 36, like me in this case, you'll find that they're quite a bit more fiddly to load than a 44. So they're overall a little less convenient to deal with. Now, one solution I've come up with is just a little funnel like this, and I printed this one, and it comes with my paper cartridge kit. But in any case, it aids just enough to filling that cylinder that it comes in quite a bit of handy. So if you're filling that from a flask like this, right, that's just about perfect. But if you compare that to trying to fill it directly, it's just a little more fiddly, and you might spill powder all over the place, and you kind of don't want to do that. So using a little funnel like this, whether you get one like this one or in brass, whichever solution that you find, that'll make your life a little bit easier there. So I recommend doing that. Another thing that I found with the Piettas in particular, and I don't think you birdies are like this, and this gun is capped, but there's obviously, you saw there's no charge in here. This kind of cutout in the recoil shield, there's a couple of things different from the Uberti 1851s and even the Pietta 1860 Army, which is otherwise pretty similar to this, but this cutout is really, really shallow, and it doesn't have the little channel in the middle like some of the other guns do. And as you can see, if you can see it at all, the percussion cap just barely clears that cutout. Now, what that means is that it becomes really difficult to actually get a cap on there straight on. You kind of have to get it on at an angle, which isn't super convenient. And I'll show you that, how I've actually managed to do that with my star cappers in the next segment here. So if we take the capper and you angle it inwards a bit, and then rotate it down so that the cap eventually sits flush. Should hear a snap. And good. But I wanted to talk about that and mention that specifically with these Pietta 1851s, that cutout is very small. So what you end up having to do to load this and cap this is I would load the charges with the rammer on the gun, take it apart, set it down on my table, and cap it with my star capper, one by one. So you kind of end up having to do that, and I'll kind of show you what that would look like here. Take your capper and you can just pop them right off, like that one just came off because it wanted to go on there even though there's already a cap. In any case, that's the method that I ended up using to load this, and as this is happening, you're also dealing with the fouling that builds up over a shoot, right? So I probably put 40 or 50 rounds to this gun all told, and you want to really grease this arbor very well using some boar butter or some homemade grease or something like that to give it a good amount of lubrication to get into these channels, because that'll help that cylinder to continue to turn. So I did have to help it along as you cock it and rotating the cylinder manually with your fingers. And this also happens kind of regardless of what you do, because these caps will bust off and they'll kind of fall into this back in this recoil channel. And you can see where they've made a sort of a cutout here. All right, as you cock the gun and the cylinder rotates, the cap, the spent percussion cap, will want to slide in this channel and fly out of the gun. I'm going to try to show you that. Just to separate it a bit, you can see where that's meant to slide into that, or rather slide across to that channel. Now it does help a little bit in getting rid of some of those busted percussion cap bits and things like that, but it's not perfect, and it will kind of jam up and drag on you at times. And one more thing I'll mention about the Piettas is maybe best just demonstrated. We'll reassemble the gun. Okay, now I'm going to cock this, but I'm not going to pull that trigger. Fingers off the trigger. Now what you'll note is that we're on a percussion cap. Now I'm going to carefully lower the hammer down onto that cap. Now I'm also going to retract the hammer next, And if you notice, that doesn't want to go. So there's a little bit of internal geometry where the bolt stop part is not going past the cam on the hammer. So it's not letting that pass and letting the hammer come all the way back because the cap sticks out just enough, just barely enough, to jam up that mechanism. So if you load one of these and get ready to fire on range, you might run into this problem. So the quickest solution to this is, again, to disassemble the gun, pop the barrel off, and now, because the hammer's down, you might think that the cylinder doesn't want to move, but if you just tug at it a bit, it will. And what I'll do is put it on the half cock, put the cylinder back down, and I'll line up one of the safety pins on the cylinder, and I'll just lower that hammer on the safety pin. And you can see this is not a very good solution, but once that's done and it's on a safety pin, the bolt stop is now holding the cylinder in place, more or less, and we can put our barrel back on. You can see when your wedge comes out and you're on a firing range and you just want to get to shooting, that whole process of kind of fixing that problem is not very convenient, especially after you've already disassembled and reassembled the gun during the loading process. So it's quite a fiddly gun to operate, and I think it's just because of little design flaws or very tight tolerances. I'm not sure that design flaw is even the right word, but the tolerance between kind of the hammer and the nipple is pretty tight. And then this cutout is really shallow, as we mentioned. So it makes it just that much more kind of difficult to load. So if you want one of these, in particular a Pietta, keep in mind that you might have these types of problems. So hopefully you've enjoyed or at least gotten some value out of this presentation, the Pietta 1851 Navy in .36 caliber. If you'd like to see more of this type of content, leave a like on the video, subscribe if you'd like, and if you're interested in any of the gear and kit that I have, please be sure and visit the Etsy store linked in the description. So with that, I'll see you next time.